premium court plays have been hitting big this past week, and we wanted to recap the recent action. BigT led the way with a 150K PGA shipper to start the week. Tony shared his early guy player pool in the premium Discord before lock, benefiting our members and peppering the leaderboards with RPS logos.
Oh, Stevie Boyden called me a dickhead too? You didn't say that part, man. I just saw that in there.
Hoop followed up in MLB with a 100K hit of his own. Hoop hit with his core, which went off for our subscribers as well. Finally, Draft Cheat added a big 50K single bullet hit of his own in the MLB afternoon slate, and we got to witness him sweating out the final moments live on our premium final countdown show.
Yes. There it is.
There we go, DC.
DC with the ship.
That's what we do, baby. What was the total? How much total did you have in?
$47 to win.
$47? That's going to be a legendary screenshot.
The Discord was on fire with members riding with DC, proving once again nobody comes close to picking winners like the Run Piers squad.
It was the core on the site too, obviously, because you only played because of that. So the members had to smash too.
Oh yeah, I saw a bunch of members up there.
Our subscriptions are more valuable than ever with our Premium Print Fest Friday Night Fireworks, where we broadcast all of our shows for members only every Friday. And speaking of members, congrats to all of our members who have been crushing it in July. Nika hit for 14K in MLB, TAJ 50-50 hit for 25K in MLB, Nuggets 33 had a 20K shipper in MLB, Michael Smith hit for 20K in MLB too. Finally, T-Zur joined the party, shipping a 20K hit of his own. Meanwhile, Nico H22 hit for 10K in NBA Summer League DraftKings contest with an assist from the great content Rubio and Kurt Jones have been providing. If you haven't subscribed yet, get it now by using the promo code RPSHeater25 to knock 25% off your first payment on a weekly or monthly subscription. Get it now and find out why our logos are consistently all over the leaderboard.
What's going on, everyone? AP over here, Run Pure Sports. We got the Office Hour show with our partners, Sabersim. We got my guy, Jordan. Jordan, man, how's it going? It's Open Championship week. We got, St. Andrews, the old course. It's going to be phenomenal. We're going to talk through the optimizer, how to use it for PGA. Again, just a few things. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Helps us out a ton. We're going to go through some builds. We're going to talk MME, full 150. We're going to talk, how do you dial in it if you're a 3 to 5 max player? If you're a single entry player, cash game player. We're going to try to cover as much as we can in the 45 to an hour that we have time scheduled today. Again, also, we're going to run through some builds. We're going to start off with kind of a generic baseline build. But if you want us to throw some players out there and use them, we'll be happy to. Just throw some names in chat and we will get to them. Jordan, let's bring you in, man. How's it going? How are you feeling coming into this week?
I'm feeling good, man. I'm excited. I'm ready to be back on here for another major. Last major of the year here. It always seems like it goes super fast. Boom, boom, boom. And then we're done. But excited to build some lineups here and start talking about a few things here for this particular slate. So one of the things, I'll just kind of like jump right in. I know we got a lot we want to talk about here. Got a lot of different builds we want to run here. One of the things that I think is really advantageous about using a tool like Sabersim for golf in particular is that because we simulate out these golf tournaments thousands of times, that ends up basically being what we use to build your lineups. You get away from a lot of the problems with average projections when you're using other optimizers and other tools and things like that out there. Just real quick, I'll just kind of do a very quick example here. So we got Scotty Scheffler here projected for 74.9 fantasy points, right? And if I pull up his range of outcomes, this is actually what comes directly from the simulations. You can just see how almost kind of meaningless 74.9, boiling down Scott Scheffler's performance to that number really is, right? Like it doesn't actually happen that often. It's not the outcome we want, right? If we're going to spend up 11K for Scotty Scheffler, we want him to win this thing. We want that, 100-point kind of ceiling outcome. When we build lineups on Sabersim for your golf lineups, we're pulling from these actual outcomes from our sims, not just standardizing everything down to this number. And it just makes a huge difference in terms of the actual lineup constructions that you end up getting here. You just get a lot better lineups that are built for upside right out of the box. It makes you start a lot further down into the process than starting from scratch. And then go ahead.
I got one question.
Yeah.
It might be a difficult one, but
Okay.
because we've done this a few times now, and I'm sure others out there, they do like to change and adjust their projection.
Yeah.
And one real quick note, if you're using the RPS projection, here's kind of a high level of how we get our projection. We're using, a couple things. One, Vegas odds. And then we're using, the winning odds. We're also using top 10, top 20 odds that are factoring in, and we weight those. And then the final thing that we do that always comes out after the playbook does. So probably it'll be later after MLB and stuff is all dialed in. Captain adjusts it to heavier, the weighting to be heavier on the guys with RPS tags, just to give us a little bit of a, fine-tuned weight on those players. So you can get kind of the contrasting styles there between what we're doing and what Saber is doing. But my question, how much of a factor is the loan projection on the ultimate end outcome? Does that make sense? Like all of these things, we go step 1 through step 3. When we get to generating those builds, how much of it is based off of that projection by itself? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying. I mean, it's still going to be a factor, right? Like it still somewhat describes the outcomes for two different golfers, right? So, I mean, if we look at Rory and Scotty here, right? And let's just assume that we're ignoring ownership for the purposes of this example, right? They're basically the same price. Rory's $100 more. You're probably, if you take ownership out of the equation, going to get more Rory if you just left this exactly the way it is right now, right? He's projected more on average, which means, even though we're using the simulations to build your lineups, when he has the ceiling outcomes, he's going to score a little bit more. He's going to get to those ceilings a little bit more. So, I mean, it still has an impact in terms of like what adjusting the custom projections would do. Basically, so like, let's say we moved Scheffler up to match Rory exactly. So that would be 79.4, right? What we'll actually do is you still get to take advantage of the simulations. What happens is we'll take the difference between these two numbers here. So in this case, we've increased his projection by 5. And then every single simulation we have for this tournament, Scotty Scheffler's fantasy point output in that sim will be increased by 5. So that's also a really common question. People ask all the time, like, hey, if I'm using the run pure projections, or if I'm making some adjustments to projections or all these different things, am I still getting to use the sims? Do I still get value out of that? And the answer is a definite yes. We basically just kind of shift the distributions a little bit to match what you're trying to do there. So does that help answer the question?
Yeah, no, it does, because one thing I try to do is I try to get my player pool down to a certain number, and I want to be overweight on certain players. So I do kind of, there's more manualization to my process, but I still like that, even though like I'm changing quite a bit of things, I'm using the min and max exposure quite a bit. I still love the fact that behind the scenes, the simulations are being factored into it. So I can hit it's like kind of the best of both worlds. I can hit the things that I want to hit. And then also, we're incorporating some simulations to it. So I like it.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to add there too, and this actually came in from somebody in chat last time I did this show with Mangone for the US Open. And somebody said, hey, look, everybody says they do simulations, especially for golf, right? You look anywhere around the industry. Oh, that's simulations. This is simulations. That's simulations. The one thing that really makes Sabersim different, and it's really important here, is that we actually pull from those sims in the lineup building process. So there's going to be a ton of different sites out there that say, oh, our projections are from simulations. But ultimately, all they're going to end up with is just an average projection. And then they're going to assume that every golfer has a normal distribution around that average projection. And that's what it's going to use to build lineups. That is not what we do, right? We simulate the outcomes the same way, the same way that others may say they're doing, but then we actually pull from those tournament sims when you get lineups. And it just makes a huge difference in terms of the actual constructions that are possible and the upside of those lineups. So big difference, subtle difference, but huge difference in terms of actually making good lineups there.
Yeah, very good. I like it. So, hey, let's get into this. Let's do, I think we like to start with the base build.
Yeah.
And then let's start walking through there. Steps 1 through 3. I can, as we go through this, I can give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm doing, through my process, and we can kind of just go through it. And then we'll throw in some plays from the chat. Does that sound like a plan?
I think that's perfect. And I think, honestly, one of my favorite ways to get started when you sit down with Sabersim for the first time is just with I call it a test build, right? Come in here and just build some lineups, just because there's a lot of information to process here, especially if you're just getting familiarized with the slate. Because we're pulling from those tournament sims, when you actually build lineups, you actually get something out of doing this, right? You're not just getting the best point per dollar projected plays. You're actually kind of getting like a strategic idea of how you want to play the slate. So I think we just kick it off here. I'm going to do 150 max. 10 to 50K entrance, which means our lineups are going to be kind of optimized for that type of contest here. And we'll see what we get. And we can kind of start talking about how this all comes together.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Cool. Well, I mean, one thing while this is building, I'll just mention here.
I just saw that it was building. So there we go. Sorry, yep. I had a question from someone. So I was multitasking there, Jordan.
No worries.
So,
no worries.
All right. So right there, what you did is we're not changing. So you have to now make some changes. So this is kind of one of the cool things. And we did this, often with NBA going through this. So this essentially can be used kind of as a research process too, right?
Yes. 100%. Yeah. Yep. So I guess real quick, one thing I did want to mention, just because it came up last week when I was on here, we had talked about the performance update. That went out yesterday afternoon. I think I posted in the Sabersim chat in the Run Pure Discord. So just in general, like everything should be feeling quite a bit faster. That build, I don't know if anybody noticed here watching, if we haven't had it up on screen. Yeah, it was quick. It was quicker than the ones we've had recently. A lot of like little things that you do here in the post build process are all just going to be like way snappier. Everything should be a lot quicker moving back and forth between tabs. So if you're familiar with Sabersim already, you'll probably notice a huge difference. And if you haven't used it yet, you can join now and get the better version of the app that just came out yesterday. So I'm super excited about that. But anyway, was there a question from somebody that asked a question? I feel like I just wanted to talk about that performance update, but you mentioned you had a question from somebody.
No, I was, so we had a couple questions, but no, I was getting blown up about something else, not even Saber related, just something else on the back end customer service. But no, we did have one question that I can just address real quick.
Yeah.
From Spencer S. Appreciate you watching the show, man. How do we use the coordinator pools? We're going to get back into that. The one thing too, is we don't have an automated way of doing it. And so it is kind of tedious for Big T. He already has his process that takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. So one thing that you can do is just go in, take his pool, bring up 2 screens or whatever, and just, adjust it. It'll take a little bit more time on your end, but that is one way to do it right now. I can also maybe, go and ask Big T very nicely. Maybe we can get him to put his pool in there as well, especially since it's a major. Either way, we'll make sure that we get you that at some point today.
Cool. Yeah.
And we were actually, Jordan, we were just talking about that before the show started too. So that is something on our end, putting in the core plays. So it's automatically in the system on Saber, putting in the player pools. We're working on that. We're working to find an efficient way to make sure that gets done.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Let's talk about this here. So we've got this build pulled up here. And again, I think this can just be a really good way to, I guess, familiarize yourself with the slate. Do a little bit of research, see who you're getting a lot of, see who you're getting a little bit of, before you go and for example, and rush and say, oh, I want to jam up John Rahm's projection. I want a ton of Rahm this week. Well, just without doing anything, he's our most popular golfer in the 10K pool, right? So maybe that's a sign that we don't need to maybe make as much of an adjustment here. I'll do this almost every week where I'll first sit down, run this build. And I like to kind of go salary by salary range and just get familiar with like, what are we getting by default here with making no adjustments. And one thing that's important to note here, just based on the way that we built this is taking ownership into account here. So like, I mean, just a quick thing I notice here right off the bat, looking at that 10K range, we have one golfer that we're projected to be less than 10% owned in that range. That's Colin Morikawa. So we're getting a little bit more of him, right? A little bit of an ownership discount on a guy that has upside, along with some of the other golfers here in this range. And I'll just go a lot of times and go salary by salary and look and see what I'm getting by default. Another thing that I'll like to look at here is look at this leverage column, which is your exposure minus the ownership. And figure out like, what are my biggest stands? Where am I getting my stands, and what are my biggest fades? So you can see, right, biggest over the field here is Morikawa, a couple of these live golf guys, which I think is interesting. John Rahm, who I think we are going to get it at some of his lowest ownership than we've gotten in a while. And then on the fade side, right, very chalky Ryan Fox this week. I actually think this number is going to be even higher than we're projecting right now.
So, can I ask a question real quick? And it's actually pretty important, at least for me, in my process, but it's not something I've ever done. But is there a way for me to manually change the ownership projection? Because the other part of that is one thing I've seen, especially in these majors, is there are so many good PGA experts out there. Everyone's giving their takes. And a lot of the times, we often fall on the same, golfer, like, because it's everything lines up. Rory McIlroy, Jordan Spieth this week, Xander in the form that he's coming in, Fitzpatrick. And what happens is I see, these ownership projections. I'm not talking about just Saber. I'm talking about industry wide.
Oh yeah.
They're too conservative. And we see, like, I would not be surprised if these guys get steamed up. So what I'm getting at is, what I would like to see is put in my own ownership projection and put Rory at, I'm not going to say this is going to happen, but put Rory at 30, put Xander at 30, put Spieth maybe at like 28 or something like that, just to see how it impacts the builds. I mean, is that something that you can do on step one?
Yeah, absolutely. So this my ownership column here, you can edit.
And that will save, correct? When you make that adjustment, it's saved in there.
Yep, it's saved.
Okay.
In fact, I mean, you can even go back here. I'm not going to do it here because I don't want to derail us, but we'll probably go back to the U.S. Open slate in Run Pure here and go see what me and Mangone changed all the ownership projections to the U.S. Open the last time we were talking golf here on this stream. It'll save. It'll be used for the builds. And I totally agree. I think that's one of the best ways to add value in that initial build. If you see some of those ownership projections, right? Like a guy that I mentioned here, I think Ryan Fox is going to be a pretty popular option at 7-1. I don't think it's going to be like Xander ownership or Rory ownership, but I think maybe 15% feels a little bit better than 11% to me. I'll bump up the ownership there.
And another question on that, let's just say we have an ownership a projection now on Ryan Fox. What's his projection? Because I'll get to what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Because let's go and give Danny Willett, who's going to be like 1.5% owned, 2% owned, but he has, great history, good ball striker, distance off the tee is not going to matter. Let's give them the same projection, but give Fox like a 15% ownership projection. I'm just curious. So like on paper, if those, on the back end, we should be pulling a lot more Danny Willett in that scenario, right?
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, I've just done that. So Ryan Fox was projected for 60.37. We had Danny Willett at 52.3. I bumped him up to 60.37. Basically same price, 1/5 of the ownership here. And we bumped up a couple of these other guys here that I think are going to get a little bit of steam here this week. So I think we can run another build here.
This is so like the other thing too about this, and we were talking about this before the show, is your strategy going into this. Like I have my main 5 builds. I have my $5 150 that I always do. And then, in that milli, the $25 milli, not as big of a fan of it just because like it's you're putting in a lot to max that thing out. So if I'm only putting in, let's say 25 builds or 50 builds into that, one thing that I can do is just, kind of go through this process, bump up the ownership where I think it's just, especially in that $25 milli where those guys are going to be way too popular. And then, in step two, take that sliding scale and maybe bump it up, to account for ownership. And that's going to help me, I would think, naturally be under or fade some of those guys and give me some leverage. Correct or not correct?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
And I would say, with the ownership fade, I mean, it has a pretty big impact on golf. Like you can see, so even if we pick, even if you said I was building for the milli, right? So like 150 max, well over 50,000 entrants, the highest the ownership fade gets here is a 4 out of 10. That's actually a pretty big impact. If you run builds on this, you'll see, I mean, it takes some serious stands on ownership. You'll get some lower owned guys in there. So yeah, even a light touch on the ownership fade slider can have a pretty big impact in your builds.
So if you're out there watching this, what I'm saying is maybe you disagree with me on some of the ownership, but maybe you yourself, you have a good read on what you think the ownership is going to be, because maybe you've watched all the shows, who everyone is talking about. And that, all the people that are doing analysis and talking about this, they do have some say over ownership because, if Big T is playing 3 guys and is very high on them, talking them up, trust me, those guys are going to have a little bit more ownership. ETR, another company, same thing. They're top guys. They're going to get ownership, Same thing with Osmo, everyone. So what I'm saying is use all of that information. If you're able to get it, come in here, it's going to take a bit, but that's part of the fun, in my opinion, especially if you're putting heavy volume into this. And make some manual adjustments. That's what I'm going to be working on all afternoon. So that is good to know. And I like that, especially when I'm looking at the milli. Now, my 5 main builds, it's different. I'm going with my gut. I'm going with the guys that I want. But I do think in the milli and in that $5, I'm gonna crank up the variance. It's the Open Championship, the old course. It's firm, fast. Man, there's a lot of luck that goes into it. Getting the right bounce, to avoid one of the random, pop bunkers that are out there. And so, yeah, there's definitely a luck factor and variance that factors into it. So anyways, you can continue on, Jordan.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great point, especially with the ownership. A lot of these ownership models out there, Sabersim's included, are done basically kind of a calculator or an algorithm to compute that. And golf is such a human game, and golf DFS is even such a human game that we get these situations where guys are going to have steam. They're going to get more popular throughout the week, especially, majors, I think in the DFS space just get a lot of excitement, right? They're enormous prize pools. There's a lot of people coming into the DFS ecosystem to play that week. And those players, they're going to look and they're going to say, who's playing well recently, right? And a guy like Xander, a computer might say, hey, 17% ownership, right? Kind of a chalky play. The field might make him 30% owned, and identifying those situations and bumping up the ownership there really, I think, just makes a huge difference when it comes time to build your lineup. So
yeah, very good.
One thing I wanted to just point out here, since we kind of ran this build as an experiment, it'll give me an opportunity to show something here. So in this particular case, with the Ryan Fox versus Danny Willett thing, we actually didn't get a huge difference here, right? We're still pretty under on Ryan Fox, who we have at a very high ownership. We're not getting a lot of Danny Willett down here. A couple things I think, in terms of answering why that might be. One, he's still not one of the best, even with his projection bumped up. He's not one of the top end elite value options. And on major weeks, pricing gets a little bit softer here. It's a little bit easier to build lineups you want to play anyway. I just maybe think you don't need to get all the way down here, getting a guy like that in your lineup. But one of the best parts about Sabersim, maybe you say, I get it, Jordan, but I want him in my lineups. You can just make that adjustment here on the fly. Let's say these were your final lineups and you said, I want 15% of this guy. I want to take a shot on a lower owned play. You can bump up your exposure to get more of him in your lineups. And if you see this message down here, in this case saying, hey, we can't get all the way there, you can click yes. And we'll build more lineups until you can get to that exposure that you're looking for there. So one of the, go ahead.
I was going to just ask real quick. So for you, and I know, I mean, we talk about it all the time. We have different styles with this, and that is perfectly fine. Everyone we do like to give the guys that play, the entire field a hard time. But if that's your style and that's what you do each and every week and it works for you, stick with it. My question though is, are you eliminating anyone, like unchecking them before, getting to step 2 and 3?
Yeah, so I go back and forth on it. There's been events where I don't change anything. There's been some where I am a little bit more aggressive with my player pool. I think where I've kind of settled in, I think one of the better ways that you can make some adjustments to your player pool, at least just as a baseline, is just being a little bit careful with some of these really low projected guys. And the way I typically end up doing this is I'll kind of just go through the player pool, and some of this is just kind of intuitive. I'll just kind of have a sense of where I'm drawing the line, but I'll figure out who's the last guy in the list here, just going down, even by projection, that I would be comfortable actually seeing in a lineup. That if I saw his name pop up, I'd say, okay, I'm okay with that. And a lot of times it also kind of coincides with around a 40% or so chance to make the cut in our simulations. And I'll kind of draw the line there. And I will just set like something like a minimum projection filter here, which I did just clicking this button up here. You can get into this player filter. And I'll just say something like cutting off the player pool at 52 average points or less. And that just, I think, makes it so you're not getting too many total low ownership flyers down there, down at the bottom range. But above and beyond that, I will pretty much leave everybody in my pool and kind of let the lineup shake out as they do.
Yeah. That's definitely I would think that's kind of an interesting process. I do a lot of, what I do doesn't mean my way is better or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But it's funny, like for me to get to even this first point, this page right here, it's a long process. Mm-hmm. I am dialing down my pool, and honestly, I do my first cut. So I have about 3 cuts I usually make, and it really just depends on the week. So this week, I just know there's guys I'm taking out. Like some of the, old timers that I just there are some old timers that are in play this week, but there's also ones like John Daly, those types. Yeah. I'm never playing. I take them all out. And then my first guys, I'm just like, I'm not playing this guy. Like Hideki is one of them. Like Hideki could be a good play, but he's had injury issues all season. I don't like it. So that's my first round of cuts, and then I run this process, and then I go through and I look, and then I make more adjustments. And usually it's about 3 times going through this process to get my pool down to where I like it. Now that number for me is different each and every week, and it's aligned with whatever my strategy is. So some weeks I'm very confident on the pool, not this week, but I've had as many as like 27 golfers for 150 builds. Other weeks I'm up in the 47 range. So I do try to keep it between that, 25 to 50 range for me personally. But the one thing I will say, you get a week like this, the more golfers you have in your pool, kind of what I view you're doing there is embracing the variance and the volatility of golf. This week is not a bad week to do that. So I definitely wouldn't talk anyone out of doing that if that's part of their process.
Yeah. And what I always recommend too is if you just don't want to play a guy, right? You just don't want to see him in any of your lineups. It's worth removing him here in the projections tab here, because then you'll get a better pool of lineups to work with when the build's already done, right? Like, if you've decided, hey, I'm not playing Hideki, right? Which I know is one of the names you said. If we build your lineups, you leave him in the pool, and then in the post-build process, you eliminate him out, right? Then you say, okay, now I'm going to X him out. Well, you just crossed out a section of lineups that we built in that build, and you already knew you didn't want to play him anyway. So if you let us know ahead of time, X him out, uncheck him here, you'll get a better pool of lineups here. And I know when I've done this with Mangone a couple of times, right? He'll remove everybody, right? He'll say, I want every single golfer out. and then instead go over here and then pick what golfers does he want in. And especially for like, 3 max, 5 max, single entry kind of stuff. That might be, maybe that's a better way of going about it. So I have no problem with that.
That's such a good point. So, okay, here's all right, Spencer S. Back to your question about Big T's pool.
Yeah.
Here's one way to do it. Okay. Uncheck everyone, bring up Big T's pool, go through and just check them. The other thing about doing that, I know it's a little bit more manualization there, but trust me on this. Like, you should see my MLB process, like what I do. I mean, it's not as old school as like writing stuff down, but I have a note sheet every day where I'm going game by game and I'm listing out the most very basic stats for the pitchers and for the players, even though like that's all on the screen. I can look it up, but what that does for me is it just it's like, checking my, crossing my T's and dotting my I's. It just helps me, make sure I'm looking and considering each and every possible play. And I think that's a good approach. So do that. And then you could pull up other content too. Maybe you want the cash chart guys in there too. The cash plays are still plays in tournaments, Oh yeah. Like we see the cash guys win, like the actual players in there win all the time. They're cash plays because they're the best plays, but use that. And then, so I really like that. I just wanted to highlight that, that Mangone mentioned, as a way to define your pool.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note too, with like talking about cash plays, they are good plays, right? Like I'm sure Xander is going to be a pretty popular cash game play for this week. I don't know if he's in the Run Pure cash pool yet, but I think he's probably going to be pretty popular, projects well everywhere, great recent form and so on, right? Now, you can build a lineup with Xander in it that has upside for tournaments. You just need to balance out that lineup with some lower owned plays to on the other side of that. That's what the ownership fade slider helps you do, right? If we go back here, I'll just quickly kind of back up and we can look like real quickly here. What do our Xander lineups look like? Really cool feature on Sabersim here, these filters. You can spotlight and look at other lineups here. This is, the ownership fades sliders turned up a little bit here, right? We're going to get some wilder looking lineups here, but look at the ownership that's showing up in here, right? In this case, we get 2 really low projected 6K golfers here, some other lower owned plays, right? We're not just jamming in 30% owned Xander, 25% owned Max Homa, 20% owned Ryan Fox, and trying to ship something with that kind of lineup. We're getting.
I don't even know who this Tristan Lawrence guy is.
I don't either, right? And that's where what I was mentioning before, right? Like, eliminating some of these really low owned guys from your pool can sometimes help, or not really low owned, but really low projected owned guy, really low projected guys can help get some of those no name, or help make sure you don't get some of those no names into your lineup there.
Yeah. And that's just like, here's the thing, if you're taking like, 15 seconds pulling this up, not changing anything, not adding some bias to it, running it and expecting good results, you're not going to get them. I got a good story. So like my neighbor, we were talking and that's what he did. He goes, "Oh yeah, I got the Saber, package with you guys. I used your projections and it changed nothing. Ran 150 and he got dusted that week." And I'm like, well, I'm like, did you just run that and like not remove any players, not like set any, min and max, not like get over? And he's like, "Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that." I'm like, "Oh, you're a donkey." So don't do that. Add some bias to it. Add, make sure you're going through it. And honestly, that's like the fun for me. That's the fun part of this process. I look at it. So like I come from, finance background, building, building like stock models and different things like that. Mm-hmm. I look at that especially with PGA. That's what I look at. I look at this as like a, if you think of it from a finance standpoint, you're trying to get, what exposure do I want to small caps? What exposure do I want to large caps, or your blue chips? And you could do it like that. If you're a finance person like me, you could consider Xander, a blue chip guy. You could consider Spieth, blue chip, Rory, those guys, and look at it from that standpoint, but just take the time to go through there and, remove some of these guys. Now I see your projection is kind of interesting on that Tristan guy, so I might have to take a look at him. Probably a year ago, a guy I've never heard of that's going to make the cut and make me wish I considered him.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I mean, again, when I'm building these, most of the time for me, it's for a set of 150 lineups, and I'm fine with a couple guys getting in there that I've never heard of before. If I've never heard of them, I figure there's a lot of people that have never heard of them, and the simulations are looking at that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that could be a good approach.
Let's look at what the chalk builds might be. So let's Max Homa. And then I believe someone in chat mentioned Xander and Spieth. So I don't, what did you typically do? Just 2 players?
What do you want me to do? You want me to lock those guys in and just kind of see?
Yeah, well, let's lock 2 of them in, I guess.
Okay.
Let's lock Xander, and then let's lock
we can lock all 3. We can do Xander, Spieth, and
Homa. Let's do that. Those
Yeah.
guys are all projecting to be pretty popular this week, and I'm a Homa guy. I like Max Homa. His game is good, very good iron player. He has a history of not being as good in majors, but that has not been the case this year at all. He's paired with Tiger tomorrow. I don't think that matters that much for these guys anymore, but still, if he's going to be very popular, I've concerns, big time concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this could be a good opportunity too, to talk about maybe what you might do for a smaller field kind of tournament here. Maybe this is your core and you're looking to build something for a smaller 3 max kind of tournament here. So we'll get this built here. In this case, again, you're still going to get 500 lineups. We're still using the simulations. In this case, we're just locking those 3 names in ahead of time. We know we want 100% of lineups that have those guys in them. And we'll see what we get here out on the other side.
Another thing you could do if you're out there. So we have our core plays. You get mine, you get Big T, Hoop, Tambo, JSU, Snyder, Mangone, Uncle T, and Uncle T coming off a really nice week. And then you get Coop as well. You get all of our core plays. And I'm going to tell you, one thing I love about, our side of the content company, we're all transparent, and we if you've ever looked at my core, and then if you've gone and looked at my exposure, it always aligns. What you could do is lock those 3 guys in, go do exactly what we're doing right here, and then check out the builds, check out what they look like. And I like this. So when you bring that over, I've been doing that for and then hit the pool.
Yep. I've
been doing this for MLB, kind of the show we did last week. I thought was awesome, and we're going to pick back up on that next week. I've been doing this, and where I just go and I look, and I'm going to do that for my main builds today. So I'm going to have one of my main builds where I know there's probably going to be 3 guys I want in it. I'm going to run this, and I'm going to look, and I'm going to analyze, and I'm going to weigh these against each other, and then make some decisions. And I think that's me as a visual person, it makes it a lot easier on me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talked about this last week as well. I think looking at your lineups this way can just be a nice way. Again, so maybe you're hand building. You're hand building 3 lineups, and you want these 3 guys in all 3, right? You still have a lot of decisions to make, and there's a lot of different lineups you can make. You can't make a lot of lineups very quickly just to compare them, right? This lets us have 500 in just a couple seconds just to look at and see what the constructions look like. And you can kind of pick up pretty quickly on what is possible if you lock these 3 guys in, right? We're seeing, there's a lot of builds here where we get 3 7K guys, or maybe we get up to 8K in one lineup, but it requires us to take a 6K guy on. And you can ask yourself, right? Do I like that kind of construction for this week? Am I happy with that? You can look at some of the names that are showing up frequently, right? Seeing a lot of Gary Woodland here, Kurt Kitayama, right? Both guys that shot some good rounds last week. Maybe that's a direction you want to go. They fit in salary wise. And I think this can be a pretty good way of just getting an idea of what's possible here. And the way I like to do this is I'll just start checking in lineups if they pique my interest, right? And see what we end up with here at the end when we come back to the lineups and decide what the final lineups I end up wanting to play are.
Yeah, I like that. The other thing too is down. Okay, so if one thing I'm seeing, if we want Rory this week, and I definitely want some exposure for Rory, we're gonna need some 6K guys. And I mean, there's a few that we talked about on the show last night. That if you go back and listen to that show, you can pick up on them. Make sure they're in your pool. We got the premium show coming up later this afternoon with Big T, Uncle T, and Tambo. Make sure have the one other thing I like about Saber is I can start my research process, early in the week, fairly early in the week. But it's going to save. Maybe I listen to one show and I go in there and I'm like, okay, I like this guy. I can remove him or keep him in there, or I can adjust the projection to something to where, I know I like him. And then, maybe it's now you got to focus on MLB. You can switch your focus around, and then you can go right back to it, pick up where you left off using this tool kind of on the back end. But one guy I like this week that you should, oh man, Kevin Kisner in Open Championships, where the course is playing firm and fast. I'm trying to see if you guys like him or not. Yeah, I would bump him up. He's not going to be too high, but this dude can putt, loves links golf. He's a gamer too, and he's going to benefit. He's a short hitter, so he's going to benefit from the course playing as firm as it is. So another guy I like, that's so I think there's going to be a lot of 6K guys that end up potentially, maybe not in the winter, but in the mix, headed into Sunday is kind of what my prediction is. Your Danny Willett types, Kevin Kisner, some of these old school guys that are going to use a mixture of, Stuart Sink, of course, knowledge, experience, with also, the tools that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see if you're seeing what I'm doing on screen, if you're listening to the show here, right, and you want to take some notes, right, you can pull this up on your screen right now and just give these guys a little bit of a bump. And again, the best part here, you don't have to be perfect with this, right? You don't have to make sure that this number is the exact perfect way to project Kevin Kisner. Get it close. Give him a bump, be directionally accurate is what I always like to say, and then dial it in on the other side when you're actually setting those final exposures to make sure you get that number where you want them to be. The best way to use Sabersim, I think there's two things. If I, could give kind of two habits for people that are getting familiar with Sabersim. One is use all the tools at your disposal, right? If you want more of a guy, bump up his projection and bump up his exposure when you run the build. And two is to iterate, right? You just see, we've been talking here 40 minutes and we've done 3 different builds. Each time making a couple changes, running a build, seeing the impact, make a couple changes, run the build, see the impact. I think those are the best ways to get a good result. I think when I see people run into trouble or get kind of fused or get frustrated, is they come in here last second, try to make a ton of changes all at once, all this stuff here all in one spot, and then just run one build, and then it's not exactly what you were hoping for and it didn't all work out. Use all the tools at your disposal and make incremental changes. I think you'll have a lot more success.
Yeah, very good. So one last thing that I think we should hit on is just if you're a cash game player or you're a single entry or 3 to 5 max, what would you do? What things different would you do, with this process as far as the settings go, maybe locking in some players, I guess what would you do if you're running 3 to 5?
Yeah, so definitely. So first things first, I would definitely take advantage of the Run Pure cash pool or some of the player pools that are maybe a little bit more targeted at the smaller field kind of stuff here, and make an adjustment.
We could do this real quick. We can do this on screen. The cash pool's up. Let's who might be pissed that I give this out, but screw it. Let's
maybe just you could even just give me a few, right? Or let's just
I'll give you so the mid tier. I'll give you the 9K range, the guys that are in there. It's only Xander, Matt Fitzpatrick, Cam Smith, Patrick Cantlay, and Shane Lowry. Everyone else is not, he doesn't have included.
Okay. So that's,
and then let me give you one last thing. So in the 6K range and down, he only has Joe Young Kim and Chris Kirk. So I think if you like eliminate the entire 6K range, but then bring back Kirk and Joe Young Kim.
Okay.
And then let's just leave it and let's lock in Xander.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
So, okay. So yeah, so I got all of those names you mentioned first here. So here's what we'll do. So we'll lock Xander. For these other guys here, I'm going to boost Fitzpatrick. I'm going to boost Cam Smith. I'm just giving these guys 5-point boosts here, so we get a little bit more of them in the lineups here. And Shane Lowry. And then you said eliminate everybody under 6K.
Yep.
I should be able to.
Then bring back. Or is there a way to bring back? I was gonna say because he has Joe Young Kim and Chris Kirk in there.
We can add them back in here, I think.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's give this a try here. Okay. All right. Hold on one sec. I got a better idea of how we're going to do this here. Let's get rid of that. And, okay. So one little trick here, I'll show you guys real quick. If you want to just eliminate a big group of players all at once here, we can basically remove the first 6K golfer here and come all the way down to the bottom of the pool, shift, and then remove all of them at once. So now we wanted to go ahead here. Oh, I see what's going on here. Hang on one sec.
There are a ton of 6K guys.
Yeah, there are. Let's go ahead here and give this another shot. This time it should work. Huh. All right. Well, I don't know. Having a little bit of issues doing that here. I think it's because these, some of these removed golfers are in my pool. I'm going to give this one more try here to just try to remove all these guys at once.
Maybe just bump them up too.
Yeah, let's do that instead. I think that's a little bit easier. We'll go ahead. We'll give Kim
We're not trying to give it all
bump
away,
here.
you know.
Yeah. And what was the other name?
Chris Kirk.
Because
I'm telling you, I don't think Hoop's going to watch this show. So I'm telling you guys out there, the guy is transparent with this stuff. You can plug these plays in. You got to be a member, but plug them in. You can probably get an idea of what he's looking at on his end as far as like, and he's more of a tournament player now too, but he is focused on, usually the 3K 100-man field. So putting 3 in that. So if you want a similar build, I would put one of his builds like that into a head-to-head cash game against buddies and stuff. It's going to be a good build. So you can usually dial in and get an idea of what he's looking at just by using that and then using Saber to see the different combinations and the mix of builds.
Yeah, absolutely. Are we doing single entry here or cash game? What did we say we want?
Let's do single entry.
Okay, cool. And the reason
we're all tournament players. Most of us are tournament players, we want the big prize, and single entry is still like, tell people it's still a tournament. So still keep a tournament mindset to it, unless it's like a 3K buy-in 100-man field or any type of 100-man field. That's going to be a little bit different. That's borderline. I mean, not necessarily cash in my opinion, but you don't need as much, volatility in your approach or variance in your approach when you're going, against a 100-man field.
Yeah. And so we get our one lineup pulled up here. Kind of interesting, kind of surprising to me on some of this here. We have obviously Xander locked in there. Couple other names that, didn't get bumped up here, didn't show up. We didn't give a bump to before, but that's okay, right? We can come back here and look at a guy like him here and lock him in and see what kind of lineup starts to show up there.
You can also click the pool, right? And then you can look at all the different lineups that was produced. Yeah. Yep. That's what I would do. Go and look at the different combinations in there. Like just, eliminating like Kazuki Higa, he's not in the cash pool. I can tell you that right now. Yeah. But going through there, you can get an idea and then, break it down to, 2 or 3 and then evaluate them against each other. I think that's a good approach in single entry, cash game, 3 max, all of the above.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's an interesting one, right? Where you've got, 4 names from the cash pool, a couple other cheaper options with Hughes and Reed showing up in there as well. Interesting build there. These filters can be really useful if you just want to get an idea of what the lineups are looking like, what the constructions are looking like here. Yeah,
very good. Let me see if we have any other questions. We're beyond 45 minutes. Usually try to keep the show around 45 minutes. Let me just see if there's anything else that pops out. The ownership percentages are based off sims, right? You guys aren't taking other sites, projections at all into consideration.
We are not. Yeah. So for golf, at least at the moment right now, it is basically just the Sabersim projections. And then we build a ton of lineups at a high variance setting. And the exposure in those lineups becomes the ownership projection.
people have two options. You can, if you want to use kind of your own bias on ownership, but you still want to use the slider, manually enter in some of that data. I think that's perfectly fine. If you don't want to, if you want to just use it, use the projections they have. If you don't want to use it, you can always just take the slider to 0, correct?
Absolutely. And I do that sometimes. Like if there's a particular slate or a tournament that week that I have an idea of how I want to handle ownership already. Sometimes one thing I'll do is I'll actually adjust projections a little bit to kind of account for ownership. And then since I'm doing that, I'll just turn ownership fade off. And just let the lineups build with those new ownership adjusted projections and go from there. I think that's well said. I think there's kind of two different ways to do it.
Yeah, very good. Next question, Spencer Smith, or Spencer S. I got a buddy named Spencer Smith, actually. The show, the Pin Seeker show is at 3 Eastern. You can actually go over to runpuresports.com right now. Our show schedule, media schedule is right there on the homepage. So if you ever are wondering about what time a show, just go there and you can see it right on the homepage. So Jordan, let's finish this up. Good question. DCC. I am changing the projections a little bit. So I had a 1 through 5 kind of sliding scale. It kind of depends. I'm really looking at, for me, looking at that value number. I'm also looking at the min and max, and I'm not, so a Rory versus Scotty Scheffler. If I'm off Scotty, I'm just going to remove him from my pool. But let's just say I want them both in my pool. What I'm doing is, if I like Rory more, I'm making sure that projection is bumped up and is a little bit more aggressive than Scheffler. And I want to make sure that the value number in there is as well. So I'm not removing him. I just want to make sure that he's higher projected. And then I'm also using the min and max sliders as well to make sure I get the pool, I get the exact ownership numbers or close to what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah. And you can do that too. Like, maybe you say, I'm going to keep Scotty Scheffler in my pool, but I don't want a ton of him. I know ahead of time, no more than 15%. That's another thing that you can just put in here ahead of time, right? And just say max exposure 15%. And that way, again, you get a build on the other side that's more what you're trying to do there.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Oh yeah. DCC, D Nasty, one of our guys in Discord, really, really good guy. He's been using Saber for a long time, actually, longer than me. So good question. Good stuff. So I'm not seeing any other questions. You got any final thoughts this week, Jordan?
I don't think so. I guess I would just say, especially if you're playing the large field stuff, and the fields can be really large this week. Don't be afraid to take some stands, take some shots. I'll tell you what, man, I know the recent form is there, playing out of his mind, but I really do think 30% ownership is possible for Xander this week. And 30% of a 120,000 lineup field is a whole lot of lineups that you got to beat out. And I think I'm going to be on the underside for that this week. So I would say, strategically speaking, last thoughts from me, if you're playing the large field stuff, trying to bring down a big tournament this week, don't be afraid to take some stands on the high owned guys.
One of the other thing too, and this will lead into a question. Actually, I think we need to bug Andy about it, but getting tee times added in.
Oh yeah.
Potentially. I think that's maybe that we had a couple meetings. I know we were talking about that maybe for next season, next PGA season, but that would be huge because at the Open Championship, while conditions look very benign over the next couple of days and through the weekend, I mean, this could be like an 18 under, 19 under type of event, which also brings in a lot of, like, people don't understand, like, your best golfers are going to, like, the best in the world, they're going to rise to the top in tougher conditions. Okay. Sure. Some are going to miss the cut and it's going to tilt you, whatever. But when we get conditions where scoring is good, brings a whole nother level of variance into play. And Xander, the thing what Xander's been doing the last, I love Xander. It's a very difficult, it's something that I got to really think about and try to gauge what his ownership's going to be and look at those builds. But he hasn't done anything flashy. He hasn't won in events where he needs to go out and shoot a very, very low score. This is a different type of event. We could have a situation on Sunday where the winner comes from behind. The scoring out there could be incredible. And so we haven't yet seen him in that situation. And the other thing too is if the scores are out there, and a lot of these par four, some of them are potentially drivable, which brings eagle into play, which brings, birdie obviously into play, but those points all add up. So it's going to bring a lot of variance. And I want to embrace that, especially in the Millie Maker format this week. So I think in my Millie Makers, I'm with you. I'm probably looking at being under the chalkier guys here. I'm looking at being over on the Colin Morikawas, the Justin Thomas, I'm trying to think of who else, maybe Cam Smith. He's probably going to get some ownership. Will Zalatoris, those types in the Millie Maker, my Millie Maker builds. I'm probably going to be over on some of those guys.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Well, good stuff. Again, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We're going to be back next week talking MLB. I think we're going to pick up right where we left off last time. I can go over some of the stuff I did. I had a nice sweat in a couple of contests using that same strategy we talked about. So I do want to dive back into that. So again, we do have premium shows coming out today. We got the Pin Seeker show, 3 Eastern. We got MLB coming up after that. And we're going to be in Discord all night. We'll do our final weather checks, which is going to be very important. Snyder has the Showdown playbook. I think it was a printer for people last week. And at Open Championships, if we get an idea on what the weather edge could look like, that's going to be a difference maker. So again, get in Discord, make sure to look at the content up closer to lock. And and we'll be back next week. So I'm AP. That's Jordan. Simon, get us out of here.